Life had always felt like a series of relentless hurdles for Sarah. At 30, she had hoped by now to be further along in life, to have her career sorted, her finances stable, and relationships that didn't leave her questioning her worth. Yet, as she stood in front of the mirror that morning, her reflection told a different story. She saw a tired, worn out version of herself, someone who had given her all, only to watch it slip through her fingers. The past few months had been the hardest of her life. She had been laid off from a job she had dedicated herself to for years, a position that, for all intents and purposes, had become her identity. The sudden blow had been jarring. There was no warning, no indication that the company was struggling. One day she was told that the department was being cut, and just like that, she was out of a job, with no severance and no prospects in sight. Everything I worked for, gone in an instant, she muttered, staring at the empty space where the framed certificates used to hang on her wall. It felt like all those years had been meaningless. But deep down, she knew that her path wasn't over yet. The question was, where did she go from here? Her days had become a blur of searching for new opportunities. Job interviews that went nowhere. Rejections that stung more each time. She had always prided herself on her ability to adapt, but this was different. The bills kept piling up, and the stress was starting to take its toll. She was now living off her savings, each day feeling like she was walking a tightrope, waiting for the inevitable fall. But it wasn't just the financial strain that wore her down, it was the deep, gnawing feeling of failure. Friends, family, they all said the same thing: it'll get better. Just keep trying. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she tried to reinvent herself, something was always just out of reach. That morning, as she sipped her coffee and opened yet another email filled with the dreaded words, "We regret to inform you," she felt a cold wave of hopelessness wash over her. The rejection emails had become so frequent that she no longer even bothered reading the full text. Her confidence had been chipped away, piece by piece, until all that was left was a woman who was afraid to look in the mirror. "Why am I still doing this?" she thought bitterly. She had poured everything into finding a new job, doing everything right, networking, updating her resume, applying to multiple positions every day, but each rejection made her question if she was just spinning her wheels in the mud. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was her best friend, Maya, standing with a bag of takeout in hand. Maya had always been the optimistic one, the kind of friend who could find a silver lining in every situation. "Sarah," Maya said, her eyes soft with concern, "you've been at this for months. I think it's time you took a break." Sarah shook her head, her shoulders sagging. "A break, Maya? I can't afford a break. I can't afford to just sit here and wait for something good to happen. I need to be doing something. Every day I feel like I'm losing ground." Maya sat down beside her, placing the food on the table but not pressing her to eat. "You know, Sarah, success isn't just about what you can achieve in the moment. It's also about the strength to keep going when everything feels like it's falling apart. This is the work. You're learning and growing, even when it feels like you're stuck." Sarah stared at her, incredulous. "You think this is growth?" "Because I don't see it. All I see is failure." Maya smiled, the kind of smile that came from a place of deep understanding. "I know it feels that way. But every time you get knocked down and you keep getting back up, that's progress. You can't rush the process. It's messy, uncomfortable, and painful, but it's also the most important part of the journey." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "I don't know, Maya. I just feel like maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe it's just not meant to be." Maya's tone became more serious. "Sarah, do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who has been knocked down more times than she can count, and every single time, she's gotten back up. That's the definition of strength. You're not defeated, you're just in the middle of a tough chapter. And this chapter, it doesn't last forever." Sarah looked at Maya, the first glimmer of hope stirring in her chest. You really think I can make it through this? Maya nodded, her gaze unwavering. I don't just think it. I know it, because the struggle you're in right now. That's what will make the success taste so sweet when it comes. But you can't give up now. The words hung in the air, slowly sinking into Sarah's heart. For the first time in a long time, she felt a small spark of determination. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe it wasn't about what she could achieve overnight, but about surviving the hard moments and pushing forward, even when it felt like the world was against her. As Sarah stood up and walked toward the window, she looked out at the gray skies, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like the world was closing in on her. She was still here. She was still fighting, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Sarah had spent the last few weeks combing through job listings, refining her resume, and attending networking events. She had become a professional at sending out applications and waiting for responses that often never came. Her mornings were spent staring at the screen, hoping for some kind of breakthrough, but all she found were more rejections. Then, one fateful Thursday morning, everything changed. She opened her email, and there it was, a subject line that made her heart skip a beat: interview invitation, marketing manager position. It was a well-known company, one she had admired for years. The position was everything she had been hoping for: a chance to apply her skills, a career step up, and, best of all, it was with a reputable organization that had stability and growth opportunities. Sarah's hands shook as she clicked on the email, reading through the details of the interview. It was scheduled for the following Monday, giving her just enough time to prepare. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a rush of excitement. Maybe this is it, she thought. She imagined herself walking into that office, dressed in a sharp suit, acing the interview, and leaving with a job offer. Her heart fluttered at the thought of her life returning to normal, of having stability and direction again. She spent the weekend preparing like her life depended on it. She practiced answers to potential questions in front of the mirror. She researched the company in exhaustive detail, memorizing its mission statement, recent achievements, and future goals. She even rehearsed a pitch, explaining her career journey and why she was the perfect fit for the role. The morning of the interview arrived, and Sarah woke up early, too anxious to sleep much. She dressed in her best professional attire, took a deep breath, and looked at herself in the mirror. This is it. This is the moment everything changes. As she made her way to the company's office, her mind raced with thoughts of what the future might hold. If I get this job, it will all be worth it, she thought. The sleepless nights, the constant fear of rejection, the loneliness of not knowing what's next, it will all make sense. When she arrived at the office building, it felt surreal. She had passed this building many times before, but today, it felt different. She entered the lobby, where the receptionist smiled warmly and directed her to the elevator. She could hear her heart pounding as she rode up to the 12th floor, trying to calm herself. She had done everything she could to prepare. All that was left was to be herself. The interview began, and Sarah felt a wave of confidence wash over her as the hiring manager greeted her. His name was Mr. Anderson, and he seemed like the type of person who valued precision, professionalism, and determination. Sarah answered his questions with a clear, measured tone, detailing her past experiences, her skills, and how she believed she could contribute to the company's goals. "Why do you want to work with us, Sarah?" Mr. Anderson asked, folding his hands across his desk. Sarah smiled and answered without hesitation, "I've admired your company for years. I love the way you prioritize innovation and growth, not just for the business, but for the people within it. I want to be part of a team that's constantly pushing boundaries and making an impact. And I believe I have the experience and skills to do that." For a moment, Mr. Anderson simply nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for sharing that. One more question. What is it about your previous job that made you leave?" The question caught Sarah slightly off guard. She had never been asked to explain why she left her last position in such detail before. Her mind raced for a moment, but she quickly found her answer. "I left because I wanted to grow," she said, the words flowing with sincerity. "I felt like I had reached a point where my potential was being limited. I want to take on new challenges, work in an environment where I can continue to learn and expand my skills." Mr. Anderson's gaze softened, and Sarah felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe she was really nailing this. As the interview came to a close, Mr. Anderson shook her hand and thanked her for her time. "We'll be in touch soon, Sarah. It was a pleasure meeting you." With a final nod, Sarah walked out of the building, her head held high. She felt a rush of relief and triumph. She had done it, she had given it everything she had, and she felt confident that the job was hers. "This is it," she thought, smiling to herself as she walked toward her car. "I've got this." The next day, Sarah's confidence began to erode. Her phone buzzed with a new email notification. It was from the company. She clicked it open eagerly. Subject: Interview feedback. "Dear Sarah, thank you for taking the time to interview with us. We were impressed with your experience and the passion you bring to your work. However, after careful consideration, we have decided to move forward with another candidate. We appreciate your interest in our company and encourage you to apply for future opportunities that may align with your skills. Best regards, Mr. Anderson, hiring manager." The email was like a slap in the face. Sarah stared at the words, barely able to process them. Another candidate. Her mind reeled as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. She had thought she nailed it. She had felt so sure about the connection she had made with Mr. Anderson, the way he had nodded and smiled as she spoke. It didn't make sense. Her first instinct was to throw her phone across the room, to scream in frustration. How could this happen? She had done everything right, practiced, prepared, showed up early, answered every question with confidence. And yet, she had been rejected. Again. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she sunk into the couch, her chest tight with the weight of it all. "Why am I doing this?" she thought. "What's the point of trying when nothing ever works out?" For a moment, it seemed like everything was falling apart. She had worked so hard, had put everything into that interview, and yet it still wasn't enough. It felt like one more cruel reminder that the world wasn't going to make things easy for her. But then, as she sat there in the quiet, she remembered Maya's words from the other day: "Success isn't just about what you can achieve in the moment. It's also about the strength to keep going when everything feels like it's falling apart." Maybe this was the moment when she had to prove to herself that she could keep going. Maybe this was just one more hurdle, one more test of her strength. Sarah wiped her eyes, stood up, and took a deep breath. "I'm not done yet," she thought. "I'll keep trying. I have to." The days that followed the rejection from the marketing job felt like a blur. Sarah's initial shock had given way to a cold numbness, a feeling that the world was somehow indifferent to her struggles. Each morning, she woke up with the same heavy sense of dread that had started to settle deep in her bones, the kind of dread that made getting out of bed feel like an insurmountable task. The weight of failure hung over her like a storm cloud that wouldn't dissipate. Her friends and family tried their best to encourage her. They told her, "It's just one job, and the right opportunity will come." But to Sarah, it didn't feel like just one job. It felt like the culmination of every failed attempt, every opportunity that had slipped through her fingers. Each rejection was not just about one company. It felt like a personal judgment, a sign that she wasn't good enough, that her best would never be enough. For the first time in a long time, Sarah found herself questioning everything. Was she really cut out for this? Was her career in marketing a dream too far-fetched to reach? Did she have the right skills, the right experience, or had she been fooling herself all along, chasing something she was never going to achieve? It was on a particularly rough Tuesday morning that Sarah found herself scrolling through job listings again, her eyes glazed over from the endless cycle of rejection emails. Her stomach churned as she read yet another, "Thank you for applying," email, this time for a position she thought she'd be perfect for. It was the same thing over and over. Each email felt like another wound, another reminder that she was still stuck in the same place. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling her out of her spiral of thoughts. It was Maya. "How's it going?" Maya's message read. Sarah hesitated for a moment before typing a reply. "Not great. Same old story. Just more rejections. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." The message sat there for a moment before Maya responded. "I know it's tough, Sarah, but you can't give up. You're stronger than this. You've been knocked down, but you can get back up. You just need to change your perspective a little." Sarah felt a rush of frustration rise in her chest. Perspective. She'd heard it all before. She didn't want a pep talk. Not now, not when she felt like her world was crumbling around her. But Maya's words lingered. "You're stronger than this." It was almost like Maya could see something in Sarah that she couldn't see in herself, strength that had been buried under layers of self-doubt. The thought gnawed at her. What if Maya was right? What if this wasn't the end, but just a painful beginning? That evening, Sarah made a decision. She was going to stop wallowing in rejection. She couldn't change the past, but she could control what came next. The first step was to learn from her experiences. If the path forward wasn't going to be handed to her, then maybe it was time to figure out why things weren't working and what she could do differently. The next morning, Sarah dusted off her old journal. She hadn't written in it for months, but now, she felt the urge to pour her thoughts onto paper. Sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, she began to write. "What have I learned from all of this?" As she wrote, the answers came slowly but surely. First, she acknowledged that she had been focusing all her energy on the wrong things. She had been trying to force herself into roles that didn't fully align with her true passions. She loved marketing, yes, but what had she really enjoyed most in her past roles? Was it the strategy, the creative brainstorming, the data analysis? She realized that her true strengths lay in strategic thinking and problem solving, not just the technical execution of marketing plans. Next, Sarah noted that her failures were not indicative of her inability to succeed. They were simply part of the journey. She hadn't been rejected because she wasn't good enough. She had been rejected because not every opportunity was meant for her. Some of those jobs simply weren't the right fit, and she had to stop taking it personally. As Sarah continued to reflect, she started to see a clearer path forward. What if the problem wasn't that I wasn't skilled enough? She thought. What if the problem was that I was trying to do it all on my own, without seeking the help or guidance I needed? In the past, Sarah had been stubborn about asking for help, afraid of appearing weak or incapable. But now, she realized that the strongest people were the ones who knew when to ask for support. It was time to lean into her network, reach out to mentors, former colleagues, and people who had walked the path before her. She couldn't keep spinning her wheels alone. That same afternoon, Sarah picked up the phone and called her old manager from her previous job, Mr. Clark. She had always respected him for his straightforward advice and his ability to see potential in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves. The conversation felt awkward at first. Sarah was nervous, not knowing how to begin. But once she got past the pleasantries, she dove right in. "Mr. Clark, I've been really struggling lately with my career. I've had some setbacks, and I feel like I'm hitting a wall. I'm trying to figure out where I went wrong, but I need some guidance. Do you have any advice?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Mr. Clark's voice came through, warm but firm. "Sarah, listen to me. I've seen a lot of people in your position, people who think they've reached their limit. But I can tell you this, you have the drive, you have the intelligence, and you've got the heart. The only thing holding you back right now is the fear of failing again. You're letting that fear control you. You need to take a step back, reassess, and focus on what you really want." If marketing is still your passion, then go after it, but this time, do it with the right mindset. Learn from your failures and use them to build a stronger foundation. The conversation was brief, but it was exactly what Sarah needed to hear. For the first time in weeks, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't a failure, she was a work in progress. Her past setbacks weren't signs that she should give up, but lessons that would make her better, stronger, and more prepared for the opportunities that were yet to come. Over the next few days, Sarah took concrete steps to shift her mindset. She enrolled in an online course to sharpen her skills in data analytics, something she had always been interested in but never prioritized. She reached out to former colleagues and mentors for feedback and advice. She even joined a professional networking group to connect with others in her field and share her journey. As Sarah focused on learning from her past failures, she realized that it was never about avoiding setbacks, it was about how she chose to respond to them. She could either wallow in self-pity or use every rejection as fuel for growth. And slowly, she was starting to see her failures as opportunities to sharpen her skills, broaden her perspective, and grow in ways she hadn't imagined. Sarah was no longer the woman who let each rejection define her. She was the woman who learned, adapted, and kept moving forward, one lesson at a time. By the time Sarah reached her 4th month of job hunting, a sense of resolve had settled within her. The relentless cycle of applying, interviewing, and facing rejection had begun to lose its sting. Instead of seeing these setbacks as evidence of failure, she had started to view them as the universe's way of redirecting her towards something better. Her mindset had shifted. She was no longer solely focused on the why she wasn't getting hired, why she wasn't good enough, but on the how. How could she adapt her approach? How could she position herself in the best light? How could she leverage what she had learned from each setback? One evening, while sorting through a stack of job listings, Sarah saw something different. It wasn't the title of the job or the company's name that caught her eye, it was the description. The job was a project manager position for a nonprofit organization that focused on educational development. Sarah felt an immediate pull. The role wasn't exactly what she had originally envisioned, but it aligned with the problem-solving skills she had honed in her marketing career. More importantly, it ignited a new spark inside her. The idea of using her expertise for a cause larger than herself seemed meaningful in a way she had never considered. Without hesitating, Sarah clicked the apply button, even as a small voice in her head warned her it might not be what she was looking for. But that voice was no longer as loud as it used to be. She was learning to drown out the self-doubt, the negative narratives that had plagued her for months. 2 days later, Sarah received an email asking for an interview. She couldn't believe it, a glimmer of hope, a sign that the hard work, the learning, and the persistence were starting to pay off. She was excited but also a little apprehensive. This wasn't a role she had initially imagined for herself, and there were still lingering questions. Was this the right move? Would I be happy here? But she reminded herself of the lesson she had learned over the last few months. Sometimes you have to step outside of your comfort zone and embrace new opportunities, even if they don't fit the original mold you had for yourself. If nothing else, this was a chance to prove that she could persevere and succeed, regardless of the shape her future took. The morning of the interview, Sarah stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a modest but professional outfit, her hands trembling slightly. She was well prepared, but a knot of anxiety had formed in her stomach. She reminded herself of the new mantra she'd adopted: I am capable. I am worthy of this opportunity. She had heard these words before, from Maya, from Mr. Clark, and from within herself, but today, they felt truer than ever. The office was located in a sleek building in the city's downtown area. As Sarah walked through the glass doors and into the spacious lobby, she could feel the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. The receptionist greeted her, asked her to take a seat, and Sarah settled in, trying not to appear too nervous. Her heart was still racing, but she focused on her breathing, reminding herself that she was here because she had earned it. Minutes later, she was called in for the interview. The hiring manager, Jessica, was in her late 30s, sharp-eyed and confident, with a demeanor that instantly made Sarah feel at ease. Jessica smiled warmly as Sarah entered the room, shaking her hand and gesturing for her to sit. "Thank you for coming in, Sarah," Jessica said, her voice calm but assertive. "I've gone through your resume, and I'm excited to hear more about you. But let's start with something simple. Why are you interested in this role?" Sarah took a deep breath and replied, "I've spent a lot of my career focused on marketing and strategic planning, but over the past few months, I've realized that I want to contribute my skills to something that makes a real impact. This position really resonates with me because it combines project management, strategy, and making a tangible difference in people's lives. It's not just about increasing numbers, it's about seeing real change. And I want to be part of that change." As she spoke, Sarah noticed that Jessica was listening intently, nodding in understanding. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt heard, like her words had weight. She continued to talk about her experience in project management, marketing, and data analysis, but now, there was a deeper conviction in her voice. After the interview, Sarah walked back to her car with a sense of accomplishment. She had done her best, and for the first time, she felt confident that no matter the outcome, she had given it her all. This wasn't just a job interview, it was proof that she had learned to overcome her doubts, to push through even when things seemed hopeless. That evening, after a long day, Sarah sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She was about to call Maya and tell her about the interview when the phone buzzed. It was an email notification. She opened it, and her heart skipped a beat as she read the subject line, "Offer, Project Manager Position." Sarah's hands trembled as she clicked open the email. The offer was more than she had hoped for: competitive salary, room for growth, and the promise of working on impactful projects that aligned with her values. She felt a wave of disbelief wash over her, quickly followed by overwhelming joy. "I did it," she whispered the words to herself, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. After months of rejection, after countless doubts, after all the failures, she had pushed through, and it had paid off. The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of excitement and apprehension. She had to let go of the marketing path she had envisioned for herself, but as she read the offer letter again, she realized that it didn't matter. This was her new path. It was different, but it was hers, and she had earned it. In the weeks to come, Sarah settled into her new role. There were challenges, of course: learning a new industry, adapting to a different work environment, managing people, but with each day, she grew more confident in her ability to handle it all. Her first major project was a success, and as she watched the final presentation, seeing the impact her work had made on the community, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The hours were long, and the challenges were tough, but she knew now that nothing good comes easy. The struggle had shaped her, the doubt had fueled her, and the failures had been the lessons that had taught her how to succeed. Sarah stood by the window of her new office, looking out at the city skyline as the late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the streets. The building was a far cry from the small, cluttered apartment she had once lived in, and the view was something she had only dreamed about during the long, frustrating months of job searching. Yet, standing there now, she didn't feel the triumph she had imagined. Instead, there was a strange sense of quiet satisfaction, as if the journey itself had been the true reward all along. The past few months had been a whirlwind. The initial excitement of getting the project manager position had quickly given way to the fast pace of the nonprofit sector. There had been sleepless nights, tight deadlines, and moments of doubt, but there had also been triumphs. The project she had spearheaded, aimed at improving educational access for underserved communities, had been a resounding success. It was one of the most fulfilling things she had ever done. Still, as Sarah reflected on her journey, she couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. "How did I get here?" she thought. It felt like just yesterday she was wallowing in rejection, convinced she would never find her way. Now, she had found herself in a place she had once thought was out of reach. But the journey hadn't been easy, and she knew she had earned every step forward. It had been nearly a year since that fateful day when she had been rejected from the marketing job. In those months, Sarah had learned to navigate the rough waters of self-doubt, fear, and rejection. Each setback had been a lesson. Each failure had taught her something new, about her own resilience, about the importance of patience, and about the value of seeking help when she needed it. She had realized, through trial and error, that success wasn't just about getting the right job or landing the perfect opportunity. It was about how you responded when things didn't go as planned. She had learned that there was power in persistence, that nothing good came easy, and that the strength to keep going even when the world seemed to be pushing against you was often the most important trait you could have. Sarah's first few weeks at the nonprofit had been a struggle. She was still trying to figure out her place within the organization, still adjusting to the pace of the work, and still figuring out how to balance her personal and professional lives. It was a steep learning curve. But through it all, she had been determined to prove herself. She had taken on challenges that initially seemed overwhelming, but with each success, no matter how small, her confidence grew. Her team had been her anchor, supportive, encouraging, and just as committed to the mission as she was. They had seen her as more than just a new hire. They had seen her as someone with the potential to make an impact. And in return, Sarah had learned to trust them, to rely on their expertise, and to value the collaborative nature of their work. One of the most powerful moments for Sarah came during a team meeting when they were discussing the results of their latest initiative. The data showed that their efforts had led to a significant increase in educational access for the communities they served. Sarah had watched as the team celebrated, but it wasn't the victory that meant the most to her. It was the realization that they had done it together. She had not only contributed to the success of the project, but she had learned the value of teamwork, of listening to others, and of being part of something larger than herself. In the months that followed, Sarah continued to grow in her role. The tasks became more complex, the stakes higher, but with each challenge, she became more adept at managing them. What once seemed impossible now felt within reach. She learned that overcoming obstacles wasn't about avoiding difficulties, it was about finding creative ways to navigate them. But it wasn't just about work. Sarah had also learned to strike a better balance between her professional and personal lives. She had learned to take time for herself, to nurture her relationships, and to find joy in the small things. She had finally realized that success wasn't just about career achievements, it was about living a life that felt meaningful, regardless of the accolades. One day, as she sat at her desk reviewing some new project proposals, Sarah received an email that would once again shift the trajectory of her life. It was an invitation to speak at an international conference on education and development. The organization wanted her to share her experience in project management and discuss the impact her work had made on underserved communities. The invitation was an incredible honor, but it also terrified her. Speaking in front of a large audience had never been her forte. She had always been a behind-the-scenes person, content with getting the job done quietly and efficiently. But now, she realized, the invitation wasn't just an opportunity to showcase her work, it was an opportunity to inspire others who might be facing the same struggles she had once faced. As she sat in her office, Sarah thought back to the person she had been just a year ago, the woman who had doubted herself at every turn, the woman who had been consumed by failure and rejection. Now, she was preparing to share her story with the world, to show others that success wasn't about avoiding setbacks, it was about how you responded to them. The day of the conference, Sarah stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent weeks preparing her speech, carefully crafting every word, practicing in front of the mirror, and rehearsing in front of her friends. She knew this was her moment, but the fear still lingered. She had learned to push through the fear, to use it as fuel rather than let it paralyze her. When her name was called, Sarah walked onto the stage, her hands trembling slightly. The crowd was larger than she had anticipated, and for a moment, her mind went blank. But then, she took a deep breath and remembered why she was there. She wasn't just speaking about her job or her career. She was speaking about resilience, about overcoming adversity, and about the power of persistence. She began her speech, sharing her journey, the rejections, the doubts, the lessons she had learned along the way. As she spoke, she saw the faces in the crowd, people who were nodding in understanding, others who were hanging on her every word. Sarah realized that her story wasn't just her own, it was the story of anyone who had ever faced setbacks and wondered if they would ever succeed. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude and relief wash over her. It wasn't about the applause, it was about knowing that her story had resonated with others. That she had made a difference, even if it was in just one person's life. As she left the stage, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. In the past year, she had learned more about herself than she had in the previous decade. She had learned that nothing good comes easy, but that didn't mean it wasn't worth pursuing. Looking back on her journey, Sarah realized that success wasn't a destination, it was a process. A process filled with setbacks, failures, and moments of doubt. But it was also filled with growth, resilience, and strength. She had come a long way, and the journey was far from over. Now, Sarah knew that no matter what came next, she had the tools to face it. She had learned the hardest lesson of all: success is not about the easy victories, but about the strength to keep going when the road gets tough. And she was ready for whatever challenge came next. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales. Your support means the world to us.